Lot of things can happen out there on that lake. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by, once again coming at you for one of my famed movie slash Blu-ray reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing the movie and Blu-ray of Blood Hook. This is an independent movie shot on 16mm that came out in 1986. And I had never seen this movie until just this year. A lot of times in the bitter, cold, snowy ass winters, I just resort more or less to streaming movies online because you don't even want to go anywhere. And I was able to stream this movie in what was probably the original, standard definition crappy VHS, transfer from the 80s, I would imagine. And then I was just like, I was kind of torn about the movie. I didn't really know how I felt about it, but then not long after I realized that there was a Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray slash DVD combo release that came out in 2018, and I looked into that a little bit and researched that and looked at the screenshots and stuff, and I'm like, oh man. We all know that Vinegar Syndrome does such a great job with Blu-ray releases of, just cult 80s horror movies and all this kind of stuff, and probably other great Blu-ray releases as well, but that's kind of what I'm mostly interested in. That I'm like, oh man, I don't know, didn't necessarily know how I felt about the movie necessarily, but, it was a movie that I liked enough where I really wanted to have the best quality possible on Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray slash DVD release combo pack thingy. And so I'll obviously talk more about the Blu-ray after I review the movie. This movie starts, it should be said that unfortunately it's got the, the Trauma Entertainment logo in the, before it starts. I mean, I think that probably what ended, I think it's an independently done production that just ended up being picked up by Trauma for distribution. In the credits it says like executive producers Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hertz. I don't think that's the case. I think it was produced by whoever made the movie and then picked up after the fact by Trauma. It's kind of a bummer that you gotta, even on the Blu-ray you gotta watch the Trauma Entertainment kind of logo thing before the movie and then just see those Trauma names in the credits, but whatever. And what's kind of, when I first saw it and didn't know the backstory behind it, I was like, some of the overacting and just the campiness of the movie kind of made me believe that it was a Trauma production. But like I say, I think having, viewed and watched some of the supplements of the Blu-ray, I don't think it was, produced as a Trauma movie. I think it was just picked up after the fact by Trauma. So the movie starts with this young kid, and it should be said that this, one of the things I love about this movie being a summertime enthusiast and lake enthusiast and water enthusiast, like as far as lakes and stuff like that goes, is like this movie is so fantastically just beautiful, shot in the summer in like Wisconsin or something, somewhere in Wisconsin. Just absolutely beautiful wood/lake environments in this movie. That's obviously the thing that I like the most about this movie. Also, before I start the review, I should also mention that this is probably what's so funny about this movie is usually when a movie shot on 16mm, it means it's a low-budget movie, which also would mean they wouldn't have necessarily a lot of money for to make a long movie. What's really weird about this movie is it's a 16mm movie and it's 111 minutes long. And it's just like, I was just thinking to myself after I saw it, like maybe the first or second time, this is probably one of the longest, if not the longest, 16mm movies, I've ever seen or am aware of. I mean, like I say, usually if it's 16mm, I mean, even the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just like 82 minutes or something like that. It's just really weird to have, kind of almost more of an epic, nearly 2-hour long movie shot on 16mm. That's just really, really weird. Feel free to leave a comment if you know of any other 16mm movies that are longer than this, like 2 hours or maybe even more than 2 hours long. It's just really, really strange. This movie starts, I'm not going to do a beat by beat of this movie, I'll just simply say that it starts at a beautiful lake environment with this one older guy, it's like grandpa fishing with this goofy reel-to-reel, tape thing on the dock playing some music. This is supposed to be 17 years before 1986. And this kid comes out and he's like, oh, what's that? And he's like, oh, son, this is a tape recorder. See, it plays music, blah, blah, blah. And this guy, grandpa's fishing and stuff like that. And he plays this thing and this I don't know, I imagine this is a song made for the movie that is supposed to sound like an oldie song or something like that. It's kind of a funny song. and it's just some woman singing, and she hits some note, and then you kind of hear this noise like, and you just see like in a really campy fashion like Grandpa on the dock just going, he just basically falls slash jumps into the water, and then we just see like this cap sitting there, and the kid's like in shock, like, oh my gosh, what happened to Grandpa, where'd he go? And then it just cuts to 17 years later, and it's the cliched thing from the mid-'80s, just like when I reviewed, what was that, Berserker. I reviewed that a couple weeks ago or whatever. It's the same thing, kids in a, 5 kids, 2 couples, and one like fifth wheel guy going out to, it's this kid from the beginning of the movie, now grown up, older, and he's inherited, this grandpa's lake house, and basically his dad doesn't want anything to do with it, so it kind of just went to him, and he's bringing his friends up there for the first time since he was there when he was a kid, obviously. The last time he was there, what we assume is that traumatic experience where Grandpa had some kind of attack and fell into the water and completely disappeared, and just leaving his cap floating there. So, that's the premise of this movie, very much in 80s fashion. It's just kids going up to this lake shore, or this lake house environment, and I can't stress enough how beautiful the scenery is. Once again, shot in Wisconsin, and in actual probably August or something like that, in a real kind of lake, resort, or not a resort community, but just probably more rural, I can say it, kind of a lake town community setting environment place, and really, really, really beautiful. I also want to mention that one of these guys, that goes with the couples, and the main guy, well, I should also say that the main guy, I actually really like the main guy in this movie. He looks like, Nicolas Cage, Franklin Cage or Johnny Cage. It looks like it could be Nicolas Cage's brother, and as a matter of fact, I think he's pretty much around the same age as probably Nicolas Cage was as well when they did Raising Arizona. But I really like the main guy in this movie. He's just got a kind of a goofy sincerity that you kind of like. And another thing I want to mention is the other guy that's paired up with the other girl. He reminds me of that guy from Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, the guy who gets, electrified by the car jumper cables or whatever. I don't think it's him, but he reminds me a lot of that guy. Is it him? I don't know. Feel free to let me know in the comments. It reminds me a lot of that guy. Unfortunately, like the 2 women in this movie, the girlfriends of these guys, really aren't necessarily all that much to write home about, so it's really not that big of a deal. But so that's the premise of this movie. The kids drive up to the lake house that this guy recently inherited to check it out and see what things are like 17 years after this horrific event when he was a child and with Grandpa. As I said earlier on, I think that this movie features, it's really weird, it's like a plethora of, actors just acting normal, and then some actors, for some reason, I don't know if it's just their characters are meant to be more over the top or what, but you've got some, relatively decent, normal, quote-unquote, normal acting in this movie, and then you've got some completely over the top. I suppose they're supposed to be, possibly, suspects or something like that. Like this one guy is like supposed to be some kind of a vet, and he's just completely overacting, and this older guy, I don't know if this older guy with the beard and gray hair is actually as old as he is. It looks like it's maybe fake gray dye in his hair and beard or whatever, but this guy's kind of an overactor, and you've got some overactors in this movie, but as I'm reviewing this movie out loud, possibly the reason for their overactingness is just because they're supposed to be, suspicious characters, which would later on, as people go missing and dying and stuff, maybe they're supposed to be like, suspicious possible characters that are suspicious of, possible killers or whatever. So I did want to mention that, the overacting, I find it to be a combination of fun slash dumb. Like, sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's dumb. I can't really decide if I like it or if I don't like it. I guess it kind of adds to the 80s, just this movie doesn't take itself seriously. It's just a ridiculous idea in general, as we'll get to later on. So I guess, it's kind of fun for that just midnight popcorn, just goofy, schlocky movie experience to have some of these characters just, over the top acting. So basically, if you haven't guessed it by the title of this movie is basically a slasher, horror movie slash slasher movie that revolves around pretty much nothing but fishhook kills. And obviously, me being a huge lake enthusiast and stuff like that, I'm not a fishing enthusiast. I don't like to kill animals, or I don't like to eat fish and stuff like that. So I'm not a fisherman. But, you don't have to be a fisherman to enjoy, obviously the lake environment and stuff like that. So, I mean, I kind of like the idea of fishing. It's just really, really relaxing and stuff, but I've never just gotten into it at all or whatever. But this is basically, for you fishing enthusiasts out there, you might, who also like horror movies, or even if you don't like horror movies, you might like this movie just because it's basically nothing but a kill by fish hooks slash lures. Well, it's like killed by lures, the lures with the hooks on them and stuff. And it's obviously it's a mystery, at the beginning of the movie, why these people are being killed with lures. There's this really kind of funny family at the very beginning of the movie who, this movie's like cuts around through different characters a little bit. So once the kids get up to, or not kids, whatever, the 20-somethings or late teens, whatever age these people are supposed to be, once this guy who inherited the lake house gets up there, they kind of cut away to like another family in an RV showing up and meeting this guy at who sells bait. I can't remember what that character's name is, but he's this goofy guy with, I don't know what kind of accent he's supposed to be doing or whatever, but I like the guy. I actually like that character, and the guy who plays him, he just does a kind of a goofy, fun job of portraying this character, this guy who works at the this bait shack or whatever, fishing slash bait shack. And the guy, the family is kind of fun. Like the boy is just, always kind of horrible acting, and he's like constantly, it seems like he's just got a smile on his face because he knows he's on camera. And the mom is goofy, dad's goofy, daughter's kind of the only one of these four family members that actually just seems normal, and the mom is so funny because she's like this loon freak, where she's like just like constantly making, well, maybe not constantly, but we find her, at one point, I guess at her when right before she dies, just being, making loon calls and trying to communicate with a loon and all this stuff. She's kind of a loon herself, actually, come to think of it, but this woman's like a loon enthusiast and all this. She's got like this whistle that she hangs around her neck so she can always be prepared to call loons or talk to loons or whatever. She's the first kill. That woman's the first one to die, and she dies just in a way that's so funny. This family and also the group of 5 kids are having a dinner at this lake, lakeshore restaurant or whatever, and she goes out onto the dock because she hears a loon, and she's like, and it's just like, zzz. After a while, it's like, I think she blows the whistle or something, and then this hook goes around her neck and then pulls, and it makes her like, spin a little bit, and then just kind of gets pulled into the lake, and it's just so delightfully stupid. If you like horror movies that are just over the top and just kind of stupid, you're probably really going to like this movie, or at least like aspects of this movie as I do. Unfortunately, as the review goes on, you will find out, or it will be revealed that, I'm not 100%, in love with this movie. I really, really, really like certain aspects of it, but unfortunately, as a whole, I kind of find the movie to be, I don't know, kind of a bore. Another one of the goofy, kind of eccentric characters we're introduced to in this movie early on is this character by the name of Bev D, who's this kind of an enthusiastic, younger kind of woman who's, girl who's, organizing or part of this, this musky madness event or whatever, and gives a character, the fifth wheel guy who came up with the, the truckload of, we'll just call them kids. With the guy who inherited the lake house, she's all kind of flirty with this guy and gives him a hat, musky badness hat, and her shirt or whatever. And once they get there, it's so funny. There's this fat fisherman guy, and it's all about this contest that summer of probably every summer, but at the point in time this movie takes place where there's this muskie contest. Everyone wants to catch the heaviest muskie to win the prize or whatever. And there's this thing when they get there, and this fat guy's like, yeah, see if you can cast better than me, and there's this like floaty inner tube thing which just like cast right into it, plunk, And he's like, all right, it's a big one. Really pretending like he's reeling in a fish or whatever, and the other kid's like, zzz, plunk, and it goes right in there. And this Bev D is just this goofy character, kind of hot, relatively hot chick, and who shows some interest in the fifth wheel guy. And she's, as the movie goes on, she's just a weird, goofy-ass character who we find out's already got a kid, and it's just kind of like, ugh. And she'll go out jogging and in the woods, leaving the kid just in the what's that called? Is it a playpen? It might be a playpen, just outside, you know, in the woods. And one of the characters even like, aren't you afraid he might get eaten by a bear? And she's like, he might. This movie's just, you know, like I say, I mean, you've got some characters like the lead guy who I kind of played straight. I mean, straight in the sense of more relatively just normal, and then you've got other characters who are just, you know, just eccentric or goofy or over the top, and it's just a mishmash of everything. It's kind of it's a movie that, like, if you're a fan of, you know, WTF movies and just schlock movies and just, you know, goofy, funny kind of horror movies, you really should, you know, see it. I mean, you know, I would recommend it for people who are interested in those kind of movies. Oh my gosh, and then there's this band, I think probably a made-up band for the movie, and probably a made-up song for the movie, I would imagine, by the name of the Red Echoes, who, I swear, you hear this song, or, you know, the part of this song, I wanted to count, I should have counted the last time I watched it, it's probably a better part of 10 times. I'd say 6 maybe or 7 times throughout the movie you hear this song, you know, instead of being able to actually afford real music, of course, just like so many movies, they've got this, you know, just fake song. I would assume, I don't know what the hell this song is, I would assume it's just made for the movie or whatever, but it's so funny because it's so often a character will have a boombox or whatever, and, you know, invariably all that, you press play or whatever, and it's just like, you know, the same song over and over and over, and it's just, it's kind of hilarious, and you almost get, let's face it, you kind of, towards the middle of the movie, and especially towards the end, you kind of get sick of hearing this one song. So one of my problems with this movie is I feel like, I mean, being a 111-minute 16mm horror movie, or horror/comedy, or whatever the hell it calls itself, I mean, I feel like it's basically 30 minutes too long, 20 or 25 or 30 minutes too long, and it feels like as you watch it, when I rewatched this recently, it feels like so many of the scenes are completely unnecessary, or, you know, twice as long as they need to be. At the end of the day, I'll just say that, like I already said, 20, 25 or 30 minutes too long this movie is, if I want to start talking like Yoda. I just feel like, oh my gosh, it's just so weird, once again, that it's a low-budget 16mm movie, and it seems like they've got no end of film stock to just film things. I mean, once you hit like the 80-85 minute mark, you reached your, you know, your goal running time. I don't understand why this movie is nearly 2 hours long. It's just, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, if they were to watch this movie, you know, horror people, you know, fans like me and stuff, they probably come to the same conclusion, or, you know, I would hope they would agree. Well, it doesn't really matter if they agree, but I would say the general consensus probably would be that this movie is just like way too long, and it's just, oh my gosh. That's probably my biggest complaint about the movie. Like, I don't know, maybe there's too many characters, I don't know, there's just too many scenes, I know that, and a lot of them which, in my opinion, don't really need to be there. Throughout the movie, we're also, you know, through conversations with his girlfriend and stuff, the main guy who inherited the lake house is, you know, said through conversations to be this music enthusiast. I don't know if he's a music student or something like that, but he's always, you know, several times throughout the movie, he'll hear a cough or a car horn or whatever, and he'll go, you know, A, B flat or whatever, and he'll just be Mr. Know-It-All with, you know, notes or whatever. And he says this interesting thing, which I don't know if it's true or not. It could be. Whereas this thing about like, oh, all this kind of, you know, certain kind of classical music was banned for centuries because it was like the devil's tritone or something like that. And he's kind of like, this is how it goes. Nah, 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 nah. And what's so funny is, I mean, that's the sound of sirens in Europe or whatever like that. So, you know, when he did that tone, or those two notes or whatever, back and forth like that or whatever, I'm just like, oh my God, that's exactly like sirens in Europe, or wherever the hell they are, you know, they're not in this country, and it's just like, wow, maybe there's some truth behind this, you know, this these 2 notes or 3 notes or whatever the hell it is that, you know, it makes people mad or insane or whatever like that. But that's one of the cool aspects of this movie that ends up happening. And you know, once I get towards the end of the review, which I'll probably start doing right about now, I'll explain why this guy's, you know, being some kind of a you know, this movie, or not a movie, music slash, you know, notes enthusiast and expert, plays into, you know, the plot, and why he, you know, through that knowledge of that kind of stuff, he's able to, you know, basically figure out, solve the mystery, if you will. So basically, I'll just cut to the chase. I don't think I'm going to give away the character who is the killer, just in case you do want to watch it. I feel like I give away so many things so often in my reviews. I'm trying not to spoil everything for you guys. We'll just say that one of these eccentric characters or whatever turns out to be the killer. And the reason why is because, like, I think he's a Korean War vet or something like that, who got, you know, shot in the head, and then subsequently got a metal plate in his head. So basically, whenever he hears a sound that can be like this certain, you know, note or frequency or vibration or whatever, it irritates his head, and he's just like, ah. And not only that, but like, what's so funny is, if you're a cicada enthusiast, you know, you might also like this movie as well, because it's the very first time, I think, you know, in any like horror movie or whatever that I've ever seen, that like cicadas, although they're not directly linked to people dying, in a way they're indirectly linked to kills. So because basically what's really cool, I don't know, I'm assuming it's true, I don't know, because in the movie the characters say, well, every 17 years the cicadas appear or whatever. I know that it's every certain amount of years or whatever. I didn't know if it was that long or whatever. But what's kind of cool, another problem with this movie is, I kind of feel like it's almost a little too plot heavy for a low budget, you know, slasher slash horror movie or whatever. But this is one of the kind of the plot heavy things. Is like 17 year, you know, at the beginning of the movie, Grandpa's like, we hear, you know, this, you know, on the music, this one woman singing hits this note, and then you can kind of hear the cicadas, you know, just like this noise or whatever, and Grandpa's like, and falls into the lake. Well, 17 years later, and the character, you know, is the remainder of the movie, and the character says at some point in the movie that every 17 years the cicadas, you know, come out and do their, you know, mating or whatever the hell they're doing, making all their racket. So basically, you know, the whole premise of this movie and why people are dying is because this Korean War vet who's got a plate in his head, you know, every time he hears this certain pitch, you know, and you know, music or whatever, and of course it's this one song that the guy, you know, the kids keep playing throughout the entire movie, the whatever, by the whatever band made up for this movie probably, that always hits this one note, which makes the, you know, that alone probably bugs the guy, but then that note also makes the cicadas go, and these guys like, ah. So the whole reason for, you know, this guy killing people is because, I guess, they're pretty much always playing music, which makes him, you know, get a headache, or, you know, aggravates his head. So he basically, being a fishing enthusiast, just basically goes out in the lake and hooks them and kills them, you know, so they stop playing music and aggravating his head. And it's just kind of an absolutely ridiculous idea, which, you know, you gotta love. I mean, I love ridiculous ideas. You'd think I'd be a fan of government then, but I'm a fan of ridiculous ideas in, you know, goofy-ass B-grade horror movies. I think when this, you know, plot is revealed, it's just kind of like, you know, that's cool and that's stupid, that's awesome. But I do want to say, you know, I don't know if it's like 20 minutes before the movie ends or whatever, the killer the killer is revealed, and there's this one really, really creepy scene where he's really nasty, awesomely nasty scene where this killer guy is like, just like a string of fish or whatever. He's got his row of, you know, human victims under his dock, and he's like, we see him, you know, take this newly killed guy and shove this rope under his chin and pull it out his nose, you know, just like he's hooking a fish through the gills onto a, you know, a fish rope or whatever the hell they call it, to, you know, keep all the fish together on one thing. And he's just like, he'd already, you know, after he does this, we'll see later on that he already stringed this through other, you know, former victims' mouths. And at one point in the movie, you can see him like pulling these, you know, all these fake kind of corpses with bulgy eyes and kind of just, I don't know, rotting faces, like from under the dock. They're all tied together with this one rope, but it's just like, oh man, that's a kind of a cool, like, fishing you know, a murderer, a fishing enthusiast murderer movie. Like I say, anyone who's a fishing enthusiast, especially who likes horror movies, you really got to see this movie because it'll be right up your alley. You know, like it's fishing. It's instead of fishing for fish, this guy basically fishes for humans and kills them. And you know, oh yeah, he does grind them up. And I think I don't know if the bait, you know, it's possible that the bait is the ground up people he kills, but I know for sure I think he feeds his minnows with the ground up people that he kills with his fishing hooks and stuff. So, you know, you gotta love it. As I said, one of my biggest problems with this movie is just that it's overly long in my opinion, and it really just, like, I don't know, kind of around the 80-minute mark when it should be wrapping up and ending, it seems to just be going on and on and on and on. And one of my biggest problems with this movie is this character who is even kind of, you know, you've even got this character's girlfriend, the main guy who inherited the lake house, like saying, oh, you want to do this, you want to do that, you talk about this, but you never do anything. And there's this one scene where this guy, you know, they discover who the killer is, and he's going to go, confront him or stop him or whatever. He's going to take this tape that everyone plays, you know, throughout this one song that everyone plays throughout the movie that we're already sick of. He's going to go out in a boat right in front of the guy's, you know, whatever, where he stayed right in front of his dock and play this music to get him out there to, you know, basically shoot him with a gun. And he goes out there and he's just like, he can't find the nerve to press play on the tape, and it's just like, we cut to later on, him still sitting there in the morning, and the guy bolts right past him out to go fishing, and it's just like, that scene you could completely cut out. You don't need, you know, that scene of him attempting to confront and kill the killer and then, you know, pussying out. I mean, it's one of the many scenes that's like, I don't know, it's just not necessary. And then later on he's like, you know what, I did pussy out. I need to go actually do something for once. I'm all talk and no do or whatever. And it's really funny because there's this brief scene which, you know, at first I was like, well, you could cut this out, but it's not really that long, so I guess you could leave it in, where this guy asks this, you know, I think this guy's hair and beard is just, you know, made gray. I don't think he's as old as he's supposed to be, but he's like, show me how to cast. I want to, you know, kill this guy at his own game. I want to basically hook the killer with the hook the way he's hooked everyone else and kill them. So there's this really brief scene where this one guy is just beginning to teach this guy how to cast and stuff, and then the next scene is like the same thing, only it's like the next night or whatever. He's rowing up to the dock, plays, now he mans up and he actually presses play, and the guy comes out of the, you know, his you know, whatever, it comes out onto the dock going, and he's got his, you know, gloves on, and, you know, fish cleaning gloves, and his, you know, fishing pole, and he's ready to, you know, hook this guy playing the same song that you've heard a bazillion times already in the movie. And it's this guy, he goes out onto the dock and hooks this guy, you know, the main guy in the stomach. You know, he gets him, and then the main guy goes, and like, it hooks the killer. So it's like this, instead of like fencing with fencing rods, you know, they're doing this fishing hook war where it's like they're casting hooks onto each other, and it's just like, oh my god, it's absolutely ridiculous. And of course this guy, you know, the main guy being a novice fisherman or whatever, kind of loses, and he gets hooked and pulled into, you know, under the dock. And then one thing I also didn't mention is, you know, this guy's girlfriend earlier on had been captured by this guy, and in one of the many scenes that are just completely unnecessary. There's a scene where she's talking to him and trying to convince him, the killer guy, to let her go, and it's just like, oh my gosh, so many of these scenes you absolutely do not need. But of course, you know, this guy, the main guy, gets hooked, but he wakes up, you know, in this guy's little hut or whatever, and he ends up, you know, rescuing his girlfriend and living, and the killer guy actually, in a kind of a twist of events, does end up escaping, and it's kind of left open for a sequel, if you will. But in my opinion, there's too much of the first movie, enough of the first movie to kind of almost be a sequel in itself. So obviously I'm not aware of a Blood Hook Part 2 existing, so I don't think a sequel is ever made. But I mean, you know, let's face it, they made a sequel to Halloween 40 years after, so maybe 40 years after 1986 they can make a sequel to Blood Hook. But unfortunately, just because, you know, I'm really torn with this movie because there's so many things I love about it, just its campiness, goofiness, and the absolutely beautiful wood/lake environments and stuff. but I just feel like it's way too long, and almost like half of the scenes in the movie are almost not even really needed in my opinion. So I'm only going to be able to go 2 stars out of 4 stars for Blood Hook. As I said, I mean, it's got so many things that I love, just over-the-top goofy characters, dialogue, situations. But then there's a lot of things I don't love, like scenes that are just like, why is this scene here? Why is this scene there? So that'll be my review of the movie. Now on to my review of the absolutely, completely and totally amazing Blu-ray/DVD combo that came out 2018 from Vinegar Syndrome. It features a newly scanned and restored in 2K from the original 16mm camera negative. As you can see here, these other special features, you can just see them. I won't read them all. Hook, line, and sinker, interview with the director. First Blood Hook, interview with the actress Lisa Todd. You've got all these other special features as well. Of course, this movie, or this Blu-ray, is presented in 1:6:6 aspect ratio, so on your widescreen TV you are going to see very narrow black bars on the sides of your screen. But before I get on to the rest of the review of the Blu-ray, I'll simply say that, oh my gosh, having just rewatched this, this is the 3rd time I've seen it, and 2nd time I've seen this Blu-ray, just recently rewatched it again. And oh my gosh, I can't imagine this movie ever looking any better than this. It's, a lot of these scenes might be boring or not needed in my opinion, but even if they're not, boring or not needed, they are, pretty much every one of them is just a delight to look at in this transfer. I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's just so amazing as the years go on, and companies like Vinegar Syndrome are treating these old movies, these old goofy movies, with such care, and that they deserve, that they've always deserved. So many A-grade movies kept on getting releases and over the years, and these movies were left forgotten. Now finally, through companies like Vinegar Syndrome and stuff, these old classic movies, which I actually enjoy a lot more than your kind of mainstream stuff, is finally getting attention, and the quality it deserves. I can't stress enough how unbelievably beautiful the transfer or the scan is of this particular movie. It looks absolutely, completely and totally amazing. And as I'm pretty sure I already said, this is a Blu-ray/DVD combo, so I actually prefer those to just simply a Blu-ray release. You're going to get a Blu-ray and then a DVD, one of them featuring what I would imagine is newly commissioned art, the other one featuring what was probably their original artwork for the original VHS. As so many times is the case with releases like this, you've got the option for either this artwork, which I would imagine is newly commissioned for this particular Blu-ray release, or this artwork, which I would imagine was featured on the original VHS put out by Troma. This artwork is probably more to the spirit and the kind of the feel of the movie. When you have this artwork facing out, I really do kind of like that red and yellow font there. And then I think it's the same images on the back, just with a blue colored background. But I'm not exactly sure which cover I like more. I mean, this one is almost too serious. It makes the movie seem like it's more of a serious kind of a movie, where the other cover, as I said, it does kind of, I think it matches the tone of the movie maybe a little better. But this cover is cool too. I mean, this is a rare occasion where, I mean, either cover works. I do kind of like the fact that this one's just got the black. I'd probably just leave this cover facing out, just because this is the cover, or the way it comes when you buy it or whatever. So thank you very much for watching my review of Blood Hook and the kind of relatively, in a way, recently released Blu-ray/DVD combo from Vinegar Syndrome. Feel free to let me know in the comments, if you've seen this movie, what you think of it, or if if you've got any questions regarding this movie. As I said in closing, it's definitely, it's definitely something you should probably check out if you can do it for free or for not so much money or whatever. If you're a fan of schlock kind of goofy horror movies, it is something that's definitely kind of different. I mean, sure, there's horror movies where there'll be like one kill where someone gets hooked with a fishhook or whatever. That's not necessarily that uncommon, but for a whole movie to be about, fishhook kills or fishhook / lure hook kills or whatever. This is kind of a, as I said, if you're a fishing enthusiast or whatever, even if you don't like horror movies, you should almost see this movie just because, you know, you probably get a kick out of it. It's not a straight out horror movie, it's just a goofball kind of horror movie / comedy rom. So thank you very much for watching my review, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.